As SpaceX gears up for Starship's 9th flight, the company performed its first ever static fire test of a flight-proven Super Heavy booster, and has confirmed it to be slated to fly next. We've also seen a lot more work and testing at Pad B this week, as well as the continued dismantling of the High Bay. And we've spotted even more hardware for what could be the very first test articles for the next generation of Super Heavy boosters. What's up, Star Friends? I'm Jack Beyer for NSF, and this is your Starbase Update, sponsored by Kinsta. Let's start off with the big event of the week, Booster 14's second static fire. It all started earlier in the week with Booster 14 being removed from the back left workstation inside Giga Bay 1 and placed on one of the booster transport stands at the production site. As we talked about last week, there were road closures for testing at the launch site for this week, so it was no surprise to see it exiting the Giga Bay and going out to the launch site. What we didn't know, though, was when this booster would roll out, because there were no rollout closures for it, and it sort of took us by surprise. In fact, we had to edit last week's episode at the last minute to include the rollout. That's what happens when you cover developing situations, I suppose. A few hours after rollout, Booster 14 was lifted and placed on the launch mount at Pad A. When it was lifted, we could notice that SpaceX had installed engine covers on the 20 outer Raptor engines. But these covers were not like the usual booties that cover the entire engine. They were more like jackets. They just cover the nozzles and their bottom lips. Interestingly, none of the inner 13 engines had these covers, so it might be that SpaceX had these on to protect the nozzles from bumping against hardware inside the launch mount. As we expected, Booster 14 was then test fired on April 3rd at around 9:40 a.m. Central, with what appeared to be all engines running for about 8 seconds or so. This test looked like it went well with no weird behavior and looked pretty much like all the previous ones. This was the first time, though, that a flight-proven Super Heavy booster had been tested after its first flight, and that it went straight into a static fire with no prior cryo-proof test or spin prime testing, just straight to the fire, is seriously impressive. I can't decide what's more impressive, that or the fact that SpaceX later confirmed on X, the Everything app, that this booster is the one that they're going to be flying on Starship's next flight, Flight 9. It's a bold move, and I'm here for it. The company also said that 29 out of the 33 Raptor engines on Booster 14 are also previously flown. Although they don't specify whether all 29 were previously flown on Booster 14 or if it's a mix of Raptors from all of the engines that were recovered on Boosters 12, 14, and 15. Heck, there's one Raptor, 314, the Pi Raptor, which could even be doing its third flight if it's installed on Booster 14 again, so there's that. This makes it even more tragic that we couldn't see any serial numbers on the Raptors thanks to those stupid new jackets. Anyway, it's kind of bonkers to think that they now have so many flight-proven Raptor engines that swapping them out between boosters could be a legitimate possibility now. Speaking of what's possible, I don't think it is possible for anyone to create a cooler website than what Ryan has, so let's hear from Ryan.
Starship is great and all, but it's having some issues to become a reliable launch vehicle. On the other hand, the mighty Ares 1X had a flawless flight, and to celebrate this, I hosted a website for the Ares 1X fan club with this video sponsor, Kinsta. Kinsta is a web hosting service for businesses whose WordPress website is a crucial part of their daily operations and sales. Just like Ares 1X, Kinsta's hosting is really fast, making your website experience up to 200% faster just by moving to Kinsta. Kinsta's user-friendly dashboard is packed with a long list of features that make site management easy, including tools for cache control, debugging, redirects, geolocation, and more. It's the most user-friendly dashboard you'll find on the market. And alongside this, Kinsta's customer support is 100% human. There's no reliance on GPT-based support chats. A human WordPress expert from Kinsta's team replies in a matter of minutes in multiple languages 24 hours a day. When migrating to Kinsta, they also offer unlimited free expert-led migrations to ensure a smooth transition without any downtime. Request to have your websites moved to Kinsta and they'll take care of the rest at no additional cost, regardless of the number of sites being migrated. Do you want your website to be secure? Kinsta's comprehensive enterprise-grade security features include firewalls, DDoS protection, automatic SSL certificates, and specialist assistance in the event of your website being hacked. We collect a lot of footage from our sites throughout the world, which means we need good backups. Your website also needs good backups to protect your data, and Kinsta provides different backup options such as automatic daily, manual, system generators, downloadable, and more. Kinsta also features security vulnerability alerts, which provide timely notifications about detected vulnerabilities in plugins and themes, along with steps to resolve the problem. Kinsta is offering new customers their first month of managed WordPress hosting for free on select plans, giving you plenty of time to experience Kinsta's high-performance hosting with no limitations and at zero cost. Go to kinsta.com/first month free, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description to get your first month of hosting for free and to migrate your website over at no cost.
Okay, now that we all agree that Ares 1 is a great rocket, I guess it's time that we deal with this. You might have noticed that lately we've been referring to Booster 14 with the name of Booster 14-2. If you've been following SpaceX for a while, this should feel normal, as it's pretty much the way it goes with flight-proven hardware for Falcon and Dragon. But it's true that thanks to the spectacular shows that Starship has put on over the course of the program, a lot of you watching might be new here and have no idea why it is like that or what it actually means, and maybe you're confused. So here we go, let's get into it right here and now. The way it's worked so far, at least for Falcon 9 boosters, Falcon 9 fairings, and Dragon capsules, is that they usually have a serial number and then it is followed by a dash and a number. All three have different types of serial numbering systems, but the dash and the number always follow the same pattern, with the number referring to the next scheduled flight for that specific hardware. If it's going to be its 8th flight, then it's dash 8. If it's going to be its 12th flight, then it's dash 12, and so on and so forth. Now, we know all of this thanks to the many years of these programs being up and running, which has allowed us, actually nerds like Alex who wrote this script, to figure all this out. From pictures showing labels with the system to officials saying the dash numbers word for word in press conferences, all of that has allowed us to piece this together. We think the reason why SpaceX does it this way is because it's easier for tracking their inventory. For example, if a booster has already done 5 flights, but it's about to do its 6th flight, then it makes sense to associate that upcoming mission with a 6th flight by assigning the booster the dash 6 rather than the dash 5. And so, if you were to go back to that booster like a year later, it'd be very intuitive to know that this was the booster's 6th flight, and not anything else. So, if SpaceX were to follow that same nomenclature, then this booster would be Booster 14-2, because it's about to fly for a second time, hence the dash 2. But does Starship really have to follow this? I mean, it's a whole different program, right? Well, right now there's really no indication that it doesn't follow this same process. And keep in mind, this is something that SpaceX applies for 3 different types of hardware: Falcon boosters, Falcon fairings, and also Dragon capsules. So why not another type of hardware like Starship boosters and ships? Heck, for all we know, even Merlin and Raptor engines could be following this nomenclature as well. We just have never had the chance of corroborating it. Perhaps this is another situation like that, where maybe we'll have to assume that they keep the same nomenclature, and if something comes out that definitively contradicts it, then we'll have to change our ways. If all goes well though, there will be many years of Starship flying ahead of us to figure it out. That's for sure. So with that little bit of clarification out of the way, what's next for Booster 14-2? Well, shortly after the test, we saw SpaceX do all of the usual things after a static fire, like returning the work platform to the launch mount and moving the booster transport stand next to it. Since the booster is definitely not the long pole for the next flight, SpaceX seems to be taking it slow and haven't rolled it back to the production site just yet. The rollback is expected in the coming days nonetheless, with Cameron County posting transport closures indicating something will be moving from the pad to the factory as soon as April 8th between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Central. So, barring any surprises, that's going to be Booster 14 going back to Mega Bay 1. Also on April 8th though, there is another transport closure, this one from the factory to the Massey outpost between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. Central. This closure could be for Ship 35 to roll out to the Massey outpost and get static fired there, but it could also be for a test article to be tested at the structural test stand, something that we'll talk about later in the video. If it is for Ship 35, then the first sign of that will be when SpaceX rolls out the static fire stand out to the production site to install Ship 35 on it. If that stand doesn't roll, then it's more likely to be a test article that's headed out there. Well, guess what? It turns out it might just be a booster after all that's rolling to the Massey outpost. As we were editing this video, SpaceX moved the booster thrust simulator stand to the production site. So it looks like Booster 17 will be the one going out to play at the Massey outpost instead of Ship 35. If SpaceX has any hope of launching Flight 9 anytime soon, they really need to get Ship 35 tested and move into flight preparations. Otherwise, we may be waiting for Flight 9 for a little longer. It's also going to be interesting to see if teams will repeat the same 60-second static fire test that we saw with Ship 34. If you remember, that test was performed as part of not just that vehicle's pre-launch test campaign, but also in order to validate changes to the ship ahead of Flight 8, so there wouldn't be a repeat of what happened on Flight 7. Just this week, we got news from the FAA that the agency has closed out the mishap investigation from Flight 7, stating that, quote, SpaceX identified 11 corrective actions to prevent a reoccurrence of the event. The FAA verified that SpaceX implemented corrective actions prior to Flight 8, end quote. But as you probably know, Flight 8 still had ship issues after all, and Ship 34 was lost during its ascent. The FAA says, in fact, that it is still overseeing the mishap investigation from that launch and that it still remains open, or at least at the time of this statement made on March 31st. So this means that Starship won't be able to fly again until either the mishap report from Flight 8 is finalized or until the FAA approves a flight safety determination clearing Starship for flight on the basis that it didn't pose any risk to the public. It wouldn't be surprising if SpaceX needed the data from Ship 35's static fire to inform that mishap investigation that's still ongoing. So the sooner they get to that testing, the sooner they can get the report done, and the sooner they can return to flight. Now, if you like Raptor engine testing, the very best place for that is SpaceX's rocket development and engine test facility in McGregor, Texas. It's also a place where SpaceX tests some Starship components as well, so it's quite an important site. Because of this, we've decided to include a little bit of what's going on there in our Starbase update episodes, since, after all, the testing there affects what happens here at Starbase. For example, did you know that SpaceX may be already testing a header tank for the next generation of Super Heavy boosters in McGregor? Well, you should, because we pointed it out on last week's episode, because there's another piece of hardware that sort of looks like it at Starbase. Again, we'll talk about those in a little bit. The test article at McGregor has the right size for it to be a booster header tank, and it has been loaded with cryogenic fluids in the past. More recently, we've seen SpaceX teams cover it with some sort of white tube, potentially during testing, as if it were a sort of protective cover. Most recently, this cover was removed and then replaced for no apparent reason. Whatever testing they're doing on this piece of hardware, it's certainly intriguing. That's not the only intriguing testing we've observed at McGregor lately, though. Let's go first to the Raptor firing stats, and maybe you'll begin to see a pattern. Between March 31st and April 4th, SpaceX conducted 11 Raptor static fire tests. But one thing stands out. Every day, SpaceX has always performed a roughly 372-second-long test firing of a Raptor on the horizontal stand. This stand, as a reminder, is the one where Raptors are fired horizontally, hence the name. And there are two bays in this stand, one facing straight north and another facing northeast. Based on the angle from our footage, we can deduce these firings are occurring from the North Bay, which, so far, has only been seen supporting Raptor 2 engines. It's pretty weird to see roughly the same test duration day after day, and if we go back in time, we've been able to track the same burn durations also on March 17th, March 26th, March 27th, and March 28th. That's 9 tests of potentially Raptor 2 engines, all with pretty much the same burn duration. Side note, the majority of these tests also happened past 8 p.m. Central, which led to a bunch of locals dropping in our McGregor livestream chat. It's of course interesting to note that 372 seconds is just slightly above 6 minutes, very similar to the engine burn time during a Starship ascent. I don't know what to think, but this kind of sounds like SpaceX is maybe testing a single Raptor engine through multiple ship ascent profiles. Although, I guess they could also be testing multiple Raptor engines and they're changing them out every day as well. Definitely worth taking that into account. What do you think they could be testing? Could this be related to the Flight 8 mishap report? Let us know in the comments. Now, finally, let's talk about the test article inside of the Star Factory I referred to previously. In case you missed last week, this test article, like the one in McGregor, looks like it could be a booster header tank pathfinder for the next version of Super Heavy. This week, we've seen more progress on this wonky hardware, as well as the structural test stand at the Massey Outpost, where we think this will be headed once complete. As always, we'll keep our eyes peeled for any better chance to get imagery of it whenever we can, but until it rolls out, we're gonna have to be patient. We've been following that test article for quite a while, and you might be thinking, old news. What's definitely a lot newer though, is another potential test article being built inside Giga Bay 1. This week, SpaceX rolled 2 different barrel sections from the Star Factory into the Giga Bay, likely to stack one on the other. The barriers placed at the production site for High Bay dismantling blocked the view a little bit, but you can sort of see that the first barrel section had a dome on top, indicating it could be the top of a new test tank. The other barrel section looked to be featureless, so this one might be for the middle portion or other portions of this new test article. What's going to be interesting though is once SpaceX starts rolling more sections out for stacking, because these could be the interesting parts and not the boring middle sections of featureless tank. Previously, in the lead up to Block 2 ship, there was a test article that tested the aft section of the new ships. The top and middle sections of it were very unimportant in that case, and all the important and new stuff was on the aft section, something that might be true as well with this new one based on what we've seen so far. So we'll keep an eye on it, as this could be a similar test tank, but for testing the aft section of the next generation of boosters. If that's true, then we're just a little bit closer to finally getting to see these in action. In the meantime, SpaceX continues with Ship 37 stacking inside Mega Bay 2. This week, we got to see at least one of the barrel sections for the liquid oxygen tank of the ship rolling into the building. This means SpaceX is very close to finishing the ship's main structure, and we should see its aft section rolling any day now. Speaking of ship progress, you might remember last week when we mentioned that Ship 38 was stacked on its payload bay section inside the Star Factory. Well, this week, we checked back on this vehicle and, well, there doesn't seem to be any major change. Even the number of tiles on the nose cone seems to be pretty much the same compared to last week, and teams have not yet installed the forward flaps. The fact that Ship 38 is still missing a bunch of heat shield tiles is intriguing, and it's something that we've also seen with Ship 36 and Ship 37, at least whenever their hardware has been visible to us. What could possibly be the reason for SpaceX teams to not continue with heat shield work, but still progress on stacking ships? Could it be that they're just waiting on actual flight data of the heat shield to complete it? Again, let us know what you think in the comments. As intriguing as it is, this is probably one of those wait-and-see situations, so you know the drill, stay tuned, and as we know, so will you. Up next, another intriguing thing. Why the heck did SpaceX move Ship 20 in the rocket garden? Oh god, I'm freaking out. They're gonna scrap it. They're totally gonna scrap it. Oh god, I'm freaking out. That's right. After years of rotting away on this same location all the time, SpaceX suddenly decided to go, you know what? I don't like the vibe of this rocket garden. I'm gonna move Ship 20. Of course, the inevitable thought that we all have is that SpaceX is going to scrap it. Hopefully they don't. And all of this is just moving it from one place to another in the rocket garden. I'm sure we'll get a lot of people with no love for old hardware like Ship 20 in the comments, but as the first example of, and now the last remaining version 1 ship, okay, it's not a version 1 ship as we've talked about previously, but it's more representative of one. You get it. I'll be sad if it goes away. Staying on the topic of weird moves this week, take a look at this. Someone was delivering a flap to the production site and went down Highway 4 in the direction of the launch site. But of course, the flaps shouldn't be going that way, so they turned around and went back to the production site. This sort of thing is a not infrequent occurrence in Starbase, and you'll sometimes see a ship part or a booster part or just a delivery of whatever arriving at the launch site and then turning around. It's pretty funny when it happens, though I always sort of feel bad for the truck drivers. Every time it happens, they have to turn around at the launch site or by the tank farm, and it's rarely an easy process. Obviously, they can't turn around on the beach like so many people in regular cars try to before getting stuck. If only there was an easier way to turn around. Thankfully, help is on the way. A new roundabout is being built right at the end of Highway 4, precisely to help vehicles turn around at Highway 4 without having to go all the way to the beach. A different thing is whether people will actually use it with that intention or not, or if they'll still go to the beach and get stuck when they try to turn around and it's a whole thing, who knows. At least, hopefully life will be easier for the truck drivers. Now, speaking of things going in the direction they shouldn't be going, this week we've spotted SpaceX teams moving Raptor engines away from the Star Factory and into Mega Bay 1. You might think, well, duh, it's going into Mega Bay 1 to be installed on a booster. But one of those engines that made the trip was actually a Raptor Vacuum engine, and unless SpaceX did a huge change of booster design that we're not aware of, that shouldn't be going on a booster. It is true, though, that right behind Mega Bay 1, there is the Raptor Bay, with a bunch of Raptors in storage there, so maybe instead of taking the back entrance, teams just move engines through the main entrance. Still, something we're not used to seeing. Those aren't the only engines we've been seeing move around the production site, though. This week, SpaceX also moved a Merlin engine. Yes, a Merlin engine. And no, SpaceX is not changing to Merlin engines on Starship. The one that got moved this week is a Merlin 1C engine that was on display inside the Stargate building. You can notice it is a Merlin 1C because of the way it is. No, seriously, because it has the gas generator exhaust port sticking on the side and the cooling channels are visible on the nozzle, unlike those on the Merlin 1D. This engine was on display alongside an old Raptor 1 engine, which was also removed from the building this past week. This is all part of the work that's been ongoing to dismantle the Stargate building and the High Bay to make space for the upcoming Giga Bay. The fact that Stargate's interior is being emptied out probably means we're about to see some major dismantling soon. Teams have also continued taking apart the High Bay, but that being said, ahead of Booster 14's rollout, the LTM 11,200 crane that was helping them remove big pieces of the building was disassembled. Whatever the reason for that, it was a nice way of giving room for Booster 14 to roll into Highway 4 and out to the launch site, so nice. Since then, the crane has been reassembled, but this time behind the High Bay, no longer obstructing the ring yard area. It's very likely that from here, it'll start helping with the High Bay dismantling, but with all the pieces on the back. Thankfully, not all is about tearing things down at Starbase though. There's also construction happening to build things up. This week, we've seen even more progress for the flame trench being built at Pad B here at Starbase. Teams have continued lowering more wall pieces into the trench and have finished installing the A-frames that will be supporting the flame bucket once installed. We've also seen more concrete deliveries to the flame trench, likely filling up the sidewalls of the trench as they get installed. It seems like there are so many stacked up already that they're sticking out the side of the flame trench as seen from the ground. So that says a lot about the amount of progress that they've made. Eventually, once that flame trench is nearly done, SpaceX will be installing the giant two-sided flame bucket that will deflect the exhaust from the Raptors on the Super Heavy booster. This flame bucket is being built at the Sanchez lot, and this week I went out to get a better look at this piece of hardware. As we explained last week, SpaceX teams are currently in the process of drilling holes on each of the tubes for this diverter. Once in action, water will exit those holes at high pressure and will be instantly vaporized by the engine exhaust, creating a protective layer right above the diverter, similar to what we see at Pad A's deluge system. On these views, we can also see the cap that will be protecting the section where both pieces will be joined. This cap will also be water-cooled, something that can be evidenced by the massive water pipe running through its center. Near that flame bucket is also the launch mount for Pad B being built at Sanchez as well. Do you remember a few weeks ago when we noticed from this angle a pipe running inside the launch mount and we said, oh, this may be related to water lines inside the mount? Well, in the shots I got this week, it seems like exit pipes have been added on both of the holes where we could see this pipe previously. We can also observe smaller and thinner lines going into the mount. Oftentimes, thinner pipes tend to be related with things like high-pressure fluids like nitrogen gas or similar, but there's no way to know for sure what they could be for yet. Back at the launch site, teams continue testing the chopstick arms at Pad B, giving them quite a workout before moving on to testing with the mass simulators. It's quite strange to not have seen that kind of testing happening yet, but I guess they're not exactly in a rush right now. Teams also continue working around the clock on other parts of the launch site, from the tank farm to the new gantry at Pad B, or even that pad's deluge system. The work does not stop, even when there's horrible weather rolling through. I mean, the frenetic pace makes sense given that all of this work is going to have to briefly grind to a halt come Flight 9. Another place where work doesn't seem to have stopped is at Launch Complex 39A, the other Starship launch site that SpaceX is working on. In the last couple of weeks, we've talked about how teams have been installing sheet piles in order to start the excavation of the flame trench at that launch pad. That work has continued in the last week, with more sheet piles being laid at the flame trench site. What's really interesting though is that this work continued even throughout the night, and even until a few hours before the launch of Frame 2 from Pad 39A. Talk about committing to the bit, right? These people are really working their butts off to get this done quickly. Apart from that work on the flame trench, the drilling rig that was working at the pad has been moved north of the launch tower. We're not sure if this is because it's been parked to one side, or maybe now working on the tank farm area, but interesting nonetheless. And while at Starbase they have to get rid of the Stargate building and the High Bay to then move on to building the Giga Bay, SpaceX does not have that problem at all in Florida. On the latest satellite pictures that our friend Harry Stranger has provided to us, it looks like teams have made quite a lot of progress on the foundations for that building at Roberts Road. With all the action going on at the many places SpaceX is working on Starship, the program's momentum is probably at the highest it's ever been. And trying to cover everything at once is pretty hard, but we try our best. And that is all thanks to you who are watching, of course, which allows us to do what we do. Thanks to Kinsta for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to head to kinsta.com/firstmonthfree or click the link in the description to get your first month of managed WordPress hosting for free and migrate your website over at no cost. Alright, that's going to be all for this week. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, don't forget, be excellent to each other.